Let's start with the introduction of Your Brain on Porn. The author starts the book basically by quoting Aristotle and one of his quotes, which is a very motivating quote, so to say. It says that I count him braver who overcomes his desires than him who conquers his enemies. For the hardest victory is over self. Now, the author starts by telling us that why are we interested in this particular topic in the first place. It might be because we have heard about nofap or over the Reddit community and other such sources, and we are curious why a large amount of people are giving porn up in large numbers, or we might have suffered from, let's say, some negative consequences, and we have connected the dots to find that a lot of these negative consequences, such as social anxiety or erectile dysfunction, are due to porn use. Now, there are a lot of authoritative sources and a lot of physicians that will tell you that porn is normal and there are no severe symptoms to it and there is no conclusive proof to it, and it would also be very easy for liberals to completely dismiss porn use by telling that it's the right wing or the religious people, because they criticize porn use the most, that you should indulge in porn undertaking. However, as the author has studied porn usage for at least the last 9 years and the brain even longer, he tells us that political ideology in this particular case is completely irrelevant. It's simply about the effects of porn on brain and whether giving it up can have any positive impacts on your everyday life. Then he cites various studies. He tells us the example of a 2008 study, according to which 5.2% adolescents were daily porn users, and by 2017, this number had gone up to 39% of males and 4% of females who viewed porn daily. And this is not even accounting for people who do not view it daily but occasionally or from time to time. Now, the author tells us that he has been a non religious person from Seattle and a liberal in that regard, and he has always believed in the motto live and let lived. But when people started coming on his wife's side and claiming porn addiction, as the author was interested in neuroplasticity, addiction, and material changes to brain, he started investigating the causes that are leading to this particular phenomenon. To which he gives us the example of the book by Norman Dwach, The Brain That Changed Itself. In the book, various things are written about the brain. For example, the porn usage is a behavior that has no punishment, only reward. Thus, it can impair our dopamine receptors, and because brain is has plasticity, these new images that come about can lead to removal of the old interest in sex, which is to say that you might find real women less attractive, or your girlfriend or your partner less attractive as compared to previously because of the ill effects of porn. To this, going cold turkey or avoiding masturbation to porn can cause several benefits, according to the book by Norman Dwach. Now, people who understood the brain hijacking effectively started following these principles, and it's worth noting here that this is an evolutionary beneficial behavior that is being hijacked by the porn use, which is to say that evolutionary we are programmed to try to mate with different individuals and try to mate as often as possible, because it would lead to an evolutionary advantage. And this is something which is basically leading to an overindulgence in the porn use. Thereafter, there are a lot of effects of chronic overconsumption of porn, which are very negative, such as erectile dysfunction and leading to new fetishes being developed and leading to viewing of violent porn and other such things. Now, when former porn users looked at all of these researches and decided to take charge on their action, realizing their symptoms and the negative effects that they were being forced upon, they realized certain changes in their life. However, a lot of individuals, unfortunately, were motivated by sexual dysfunction such as erectile dysfunction, uh, such as premature ejaculation, and other such conditions, while because of their porn usage, and hence they had to give up the porn. One study in this regard is a 2007 renowned study by sexology researchers Jansen and Bancroft, who found evidence that porn viewing caused erectile dysfunction and a low response to vanilla sex, wherein you continuously seek new novelty and find old normal sexual intercourse less appealing. Furthermore, why men fake it by noted urology professor Abraham Morgan Taylor also talks us about the ill effect of erectile dysfunction. We have another urologist, Harry Fiskel, in The New Naked, who tells us how porn is killing sex. There is a study, The Brain on Porn, wherein the lead author, Simon Kuhn, says that the research tells us that regular consumption of porn wears out the reward system. And this study also gives us some evidence to prove that it can also lead to reduction of the gray matter in our brain, thus destroying the dopamine system and the complete reward circuits in our brain. And there have been several other studies that have talked about this particular thing, and more studies are coming about rampantly on this particular issue. Now, if you are suffering from internet porn and other related problems, then there is a good chance that the author can help you. The author tells us this. Now, he tells us that how can we know that porn is the cause for our sluggish sexual performance, or not, let's say, performance anxiety or other such cause. So firstly, he tells us that you should go to a urologist to get yourself checked, and otherwise you should masturbate with and without porn, and you should compare the two. So if you are able to masturbate with porn but not without porn, that is to say, if you have a strong erection while you're masturbating with porn and a weak erection when you are masturbating without porn, then you have most probably porn induced erectile dysfunction. If you are able to masturbate solidly without porn also, but you have trouble with a real partner, then you probably have anxiety related erectile dysfunction, which I think is not something that would be talked about in detail in the book. But if you have problem maintaining erection and masturbating with and without porn as well, then you have most probably porn induced erectile dysfunction, which has progressed to a large extent, and thus you might require some medical intervention to get your system back in track. Then author gives us a summary of the whole book, in essence, by telling us that in the beginning of the book he will tell us how internet porn addiction has become an issue, and the problem that it has caused on the various people. Then he will tell us contemporary neuroscience and the behavioral addiction and various studies on behavioral addiction, and how adolescents' brain, which are still developing, are particularly vulnerable to the negative effects of porn and porn addiction. Then he will tell us some common sense approaches which people have dealt with and which can be used to basically cure porn addiction. But he gives us a caveat that any approach will vary from person to person, such as an individual who is single will have a different approach from someone who is in a relationship. He further tells us that older individuals generally recover quickly from porn induced erectile dysfunction as compared to younger guys who might take longer to recover from the erectile dysfunction problem that they are having. And lastly, in conclusion, he will tell us that a consensus about porn's risks is still in the future, and there is still much debate that is going to happen about this, and there is a need for society to help porn users to make more informed choices. He also tells us in the end that he's not starting a moral panic, It is for you to decide that if you have a problem or a healthy or natural sexuality or not. And if you don't have a problem, then the author is not here to argue against you. It is up to you to decide what you have to do, what you have to believe in, if you have to support the porn industry and graphic sexual content or not. Again, his motto, live and let live. But if you are suffering the ill effects of pornography, or if someone you know is suffering the ill effect of pornography, then he will do his best to try to explain the unexpected effects of pornography and how you can possibly tackle the problem.